She stood on the gallows, the noose rough against her neck, her hands shaking as the crowd waited for the trapdoor to fall. The sheriff read out her sentence, guilty of a crime she couldn't even remember committing. She had no name she trusted, no past to cling to, and no one who would stand for her, until a shot split the air and stopped the hanging cold. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got something truly special coming your way tomorrow. The town of Ash Creek gathered like buzzards on a carcass. Men, women, and children pressed shoulder to shoulder in the dusty square, their faces hard beneath the relentless sun. The gallows rose in the center, raw timbers cut from the pines upriver, still bleeding sap in the heat. A thick hemp rope swayed in the faint breeze, its noose dangling at the height of a woman's throat, the woman who stood there now, Rowan Hart. At least, that was the name Sheriff Ezra Pike had given her. She wasn't sure it was hers. She wasn't sure of anything. The boards creaked under her boots as the deputy shoved her forward, a rough rope biting into her wrists behind her back. The crowd booed, spit, and shouted for blood. She felt their eyes like knives. Every face seemed to know her or hate her, though she recognized none of them. She had no memory beyond waking in a barn 2 weeks ago, cold straw clinging to her hair, a marshal's pistol aimed at her head. Now, she stood with a rope ready to finish the job. Sheriff Pike mounted the platform with the slow, deliberate steps of a man used to ending lives by the book. Tall, lean, his jaw carved sharp as his badge, he unrolled a sheet of paper and read, aloud, "Rowan Hart, you stand accused of murdering the rancher Thomas Avery in cold blood. You've had your trial and the verdict was guilty. Sentence, death by hanging carried out this day before the eyes of God and this good town." Rowan's throat tightened. "I never killed no one." The crowd roared back, "Liar! Witch! Killer!" Her voice broke, desperation leaking through. "I don't even remember my own name, Sheriff. How could I remember killing a man?" A woman in the crowd spat. Convenient, forgetting murder. Pike's eyes flickered, but his voice remained steady. "The court's done with you. Memory or not, justice will be served." The deputy pulled the noose down, slipped it around her neck, and cinched the knot. Rowan tried to hold herself straight, but her knees trembled. The rope scratched like fire against her skin. She stared at the sky, pale and merciless above, and wondered if it would be the last thing she ever saw. The executioner stepped forward, a hand resting on the lever that would drop the trapdoor beneath her feet. Rowan's heart hammered. She didn't fear death itself. She feared dying without ever knowing who she truly was. Was she Rowan Hart, a killer, someone's daughter, someone's wife? Was there anyone in this world who might have loved her or would mourn her now? The sheriff's voice cut through her panic. "Any last words?" Rowan's mouth opened, but nothing came. A sharp, sudden gunshot sound. Then the shot rang out. A rifle cracked from the edge of town. The deputy staggered, blood blooming across his shirt. The crowd shrieked and scattered. Horses whinnied in panic. The executioner ducked instinctively, and through the chaos, a rider burst down the main street, a dark figure astride a black horse, dust and gun smoke billowing behind him. He rode like he owned death itself, a long duster flapping, a wide-brimmed. Shadowing his face, revolvers in both hands barking fire, Elias Boone, someone gasped. The name carried through the crowd like thunder, the outlaw. The ghost who'd robbed trains, burned ranches, and vanished into legend, Boone's horse, thundered straight for the gallows. Bullets split the air. He fired without aiming, every shot finding its mark. A deputy dropped, another screamed as his hat spun into the dust. Sheriff Pike dove for cover, cursing. Rowan froze as Boone reined his horse hard against the gallows. Steps, dust swirling, his eyes locked on hers, dark, burning, wild. "No one hangs my wife," he roared. Before she could breathe, Boone leapt from the saddle, slammed a boot against the steps, and vaulted onto the platform. He cut the rope at her neck with a bowie knife in one swift stroke. The noose fell away. Rowan stumbled, gasping, choking on the taste of hemp and fear. Boone grabbed her bound wrists, dragged her toward the horse. "Come on, Eliza, time to ride." A brief, dramatic musical sting. "Eliza?" The name hit her like a stone to the chest. I'm not," she stammered. "No time," Boone growled, shoving her into the saddle ahead of him. Bullets whined past as he swung up behind, one arm locking her to him, the other firing over his shoulder. The horse lunged forward, hooves striking sparks from the boards. They tore through the chaos, scattering townsfolk, deputies giving chase, Sheriff Pike bellowing orders. "Boone, you'll hang twice for this." Rowan clutched the saddle horn, the outlaw's arm like iron around her. Dust blinded her, gunfire deafened. Her mind spun with the name he'd given her. Eliza. The town shrank behind them, swallowed by the desert. The only thing certain now was the thunder of hooves, the heat of the outlaw pressed against her back, and the knowledge that she was no longer on her way to death. She was in the hands of a man who claimed her as his wife, and she had no memory to prove him wrong. The desert swallowed them whole. Ash Creek dwindled behind, in a blur of shouts, gunfire, and rising smoke. Rowan twisted in the saddle once, just enough to see the town square dissolve into chaos. Deputies firing wildly, townsfolk scattering. Like startled quail, Sheriff Pike's figure a dark silhouette standing defiant at the gallows. Then the next bend took it all from sight, and only the hard-pan road lay before them, stretching into a wide, merciless horizon. Boone's horse, a black stallion flecked with sweat, pounded the ground in a relentless rhythm. Each stride jostled, Rowan against Boone's chest, his arm banded tight around her middle, keeping her steady. His breath was hot against her ear, steady despite the gunfight they'd just torn through. Rowan's lungs burned, her neck still raw from the brush of the noose. The rope burns throbbed each time she swallowed. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all that came out was a broken whisper. You called me Eliza." Boone didn't slow. His eyes scanned the ridges, watching for riders or riflemen. "That's your name." "It's not," Rowan shot back, though even as the words left her lips, they faltered, wasn't it? She tried to summon proof, some image, some anchor of her life before waking up in Ash Creek. But her mind gave her nothing, just a thick grey fog, edges shifting and dissolving whenever she reached for them. Boone finally glanced down at her, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. His jaw was square, his beard rough, his mouth set in a line that looked carved from stone. His eyes, though, pale and burning like wildfire, they held something between fury and fierce claim. "You don't remember," he said, not as a question but a fact. Rowan turned her face away. "I don't remember anything, not even myself." For a moment the pounding of hooves and the whistle of the wind were the only sounds. Then Boone muttered, "Makes no difference, you're still mine." The words chilled her more than the wind. They crested a ridge and thundered down into a dry wash, the horse sliding on loose stone before finding its stride again. Boone guided the animal with a firm hand, every movement confident, practiced. He was a man who lived in the saddle, a man who trusted no road but the one carved by instinct and speed. Rowan clutched at the saddle horn to keep herself steady. She was still bound at the wrists, rope biting into her skin. "Untie me!" she demanded, her voice rising with a strength she hadn't expected. Boone didn't answer at once. His revolver still smoked in his holster. His hand stayed close to it, fingers twitching with readiness. Finally he growled, "Not yet." Her throat tightened. "Why?" "'Cause I don't know if you'll bolt." His gaze cut to hers for a fraction of a second. "Or if you'll put a knife in me soon as your hands are free." Rowan stared at him, stunned. "If I was your wife, would I?" Boone's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "Depends on the day." They rode hard until the sun began its slow drop toward the western horizon. The desert stretched endless around them. Red rock cliffs, dry arroyos, patches of sagebrush clinging stubbornly to life. Vultures wheeled overhead, shadows sliding across the earth. Heat baked Rowan's skin until sweat ran down her temples, soaking the collar of her dress. At last, Boone pulled the stallion up near a cluster of boulders tucked against a ridge. He swung down with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle, then reached up and dragged Rowan down after him. Her legs buckled when her boots hit the ground. The long ride, the shock of the gallows, the burning in her neck, all of it rushed back at once. She stumbled, but Boone's grip steadied her. "Easy," he muttered. She yanked her arms against his hold. "Untie me now." Boone studied her. In the fading light, his jaw worked, the muscle ticking once, twice. Then with a grunt he pulled his knife and sliced the rope from her wrists. Rowan staggered back, rubbing at her raw skin. "Thank you," she said, though her voice was edged with bitterness. Boone tucked the knife away. "Don't thank me yet." He led the horse into the shadow of the rocks, tying it off with a quick knot. Rowan stood a few paces away, hugging, her arms against herself, still half expecting him to whirl on her with another rope. Instead, Boone crouched near the dust and began tracing lines with a stick, eyes scanning the terrain. "They'll be riding hard," he muttered. "Pike won't stop till he's got my head on a rope and yours swinging beside it. We need to cut east, lose him in the Badlands before night falls." Rowan blinked at him. "You risked your life to drag me out of Ash Creek, but I don't even know why. You say I'm your wife, but I don't remember you. I don't remember me. Why should I believe you?" Boone lifted his head slowly, his pale eyes fixed on her, fierce enough to still her breath. "Because, Eliza," he said, his voice low, "I buried you once, and I ain't burying you again." The words struck like a thunderclap. Rowan felt her chest seize, a tremor running through her. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he had the wrong woman. She wanted to demand the truth. But the certainty in his voice, the raw edge of pain in his tone, silenced her. Boone rose, dust brushing from his coat. "We ride light and we ride fast. Stay close, keep your head down, and maybe we'll see another sunrise." Rowan swallowed hard. The desert stretched endless around her, no path forward but the one Boone carved. Sheriff Pike would be hunting them already. The name Eliza clung to her skin like a burr, whether it belonged to her or not, and the outlaw beside her, Elias. A Boone was either her savior, her captor, or both. As the sun bled red across the horizon and shadows lengthened over the desert, Rowan mounted behind Boone once more. The stallion tossed its head, eager for the run. The law was closing in. The past was catching up, and Rowan Hart, or Eliza Boone, rode straight into it. Sheriff Ezra Pike rode hard. The lawman's horse thundered over the dry earth, its sides lathered with sweat, its hooves striking sparks on stone. Behind him, 5 deputies kept pace as best they could, faces set in grim lines, rifles slung across, their saddles. The dust of their pursuit rose high, curling into the sky like a beacon. Ash Creek lay miles behind. But the echoes of chaos lingered in Pike's ears, the outlaws' guns, the screams of townsfolk, the sight of Rowan Hart torn from the gallows in front of his very eyes. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. Boone, Elias Boone. The name was a wound he'd thought healed. Years had passed since Boone last cast a shadow over these parts, but the outlaw's legend had only grown. Some claimed he'd died in Mexico, cut down by rurales. Others swore he'd vanished into Indian territory. To see him ride into Ash Creek, guns blazing, alive and breathing, had rattled even Pike's iron resolve, and worse, Boone had called the woman by name. "Eliza," he'd said. Pike's gaze hardened as the memory replayed. Rowan Hart, or Eliza if Boone spoke true, had been a mystery since she'd stumbled into Ash Creek. No past, no kin, only that wild, lost look in her eyes when they dragged her into court. He'd seen liars before, hundreds of them. But there'd been something in her pleading, some raw emptiness that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Still, the court had found her guilty. His duty had been to see justice done, and Boone had stolen that from him. A deputy spurred, up alongside, sweat streaking his dust-caked face. "Sheriff, they're riding fast. Boone knows this land better'n we do." Pike's pale eyes scanned the ridges. "Then we'll ride faster. I want him before the moon rises." The deputy hesitated, lowering his voice. "Sheriff, you reckon she really is his wife?" Pike didn't answer at once. His fingers tapped against the reins, a steady rhythm. "Doesn't matter what she is. She's a fugitive now, and Boone—" His mouth tightened. "Boone's mine." They pushed on, chasing faint hoofprints that cut across the desert floor. Far ahead, beyond the sheriff's line of sight, another rider tracked the same trail. He didn't rush. His horse moved at an easy lope, conserving strength. He rode with the patience of a man who understood pursuit, that the prey would tire, falter, and leave itself open if only the hunter waited long enough. Harlan Crow's shadow stretched, long, across the sand. Where Boone was legend, Crow was power made flesh. He wore a black coat, tailored fine, its edges dusted with the grit of travel, but cut from cloth no frontier man could afford. His gloves were soft leather, his boots polished, his hat wide enough to shield his sharp features from the sun. His eyes, cold and calculating, missed nothing. Crow commanded more than men. He commanded fear. He owned cattle by the thousands, land that stretched farther than maps cared to mark, and the law itself bent often at his word. In the territories, there were sheriffs who rode for justice, and there were sheriffs who rode for Crow. He guided his horse to a halt on a ridge, and leaned forward, studying the faint line of tracks below. Boone's stallion left a mark easy enough to follow, even in hard earth. Crow's lips curved into a faint smile. "So, you did crawl back from the grave after all." His hand went to the silver flask at his belt. He unscrewed the cap, took a slow drink and let the liquor burn down his throat. Then he tightened the reins. "Run while you can, Boone," he murmured. "The girl's mine, and you'll bleed before I let you take her." He clicked his tongue, and the horse moved on, silent as a shadow sliding across the desert. By the time the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky in fire, Rowan and Boone had pushed deep into the Badlands. They made camp in a dry arroyo, hidden beneath a shelf of stone. Boone struck a small fire, its light barely enough to warm the night chill. Rowan sat across from him, wrists raw, throat aching. The silence pressed heavy between them, broken only by the crackle of flames and the far-off cry of a coyote. At last she spoke, voice tight. "Who is Harlan Crow?" Boone's gaze snapped to her. His eyes, pale as winter ice, hardened. "Where'd you hear that name?" Rowan swallowed. "When they accused me in court. One of the ranchers, he muttered it, said Crow'll be pleased. I thought nothing of it. But now—" She hesitated. "Now I think it matters." Boone stared into the fire. For a long time he didn't answer. Then low and grim he said, "Crow's the reason you're wearing that rope burn on your neck. He's the reason the whole damn territory wants you dead." Rowan's breath caught. "Why?" Boone lifted his head. The flames danced in his eyes, shadows carving hard lines into his face. "Because, Eliza, you know something he can't afford for anyone to remember." The night closed in around them, heavy with silence and unseen danger. The night pressed in heavy and cold. Rowan sat near the small fire Boone had built, the flames licking at dry sagebrush twigs, throwing only the faintest glow against the stone walls of the arroyo. Beyond the circle of light, the desert stretched, dark and endless, alive with whispers, the rustle of night wind through brush, the distant call of coyotes, the flap of a nightbird's wings. Every sound seemed sharper now, as though the wilderness itself leaned in to listen. Her wrists were free, but her skin was raw and angry from the ropes. She rubbed at the welts absently, her eyes locked on Boone across the fire. He crouched low, feeding kindling into the flames, his broad shoulders tense beneath his duster. His revolver lay within arm's reach, gleaming faintly in the firelight. He never let it stray far. Rowan swallowed. Her throat still burned from the noose, a constant reminder of how close she'd come to death. She had thought she would never taste air again, and now she sat across from a man who claimed to be her husband. Eliza, he had called her. Rowan pulled her knees tight to her chest, staring into the fire. Eliza. The name tugged at her, like a thread tied to something deep in the fog of her mind. Yet no image came, no memory, nothing solid, just emptiness, broken by the raw sound of Boone's voice calling her back from the gallows. Finally she whispered, "If I was your wife, why don't I remember you?" Boone didn't look up. He tossed another stick into the flames and watched it crackle. Memories ain't always kind. Sometimes your head locks them away so you can keep breathing. That's not an answer. Rowan's voice shook, but she forced the words out. I need to know. I need to know who I am, who you are to me. At that, Boone lifted his gaze. His eyes caught the firelight, pale and sharp as glass. You really don't remember nothing? Not even our name? Rowan shook her head. Rowan Hart is all I've been called since I woke up outside Ash Creek, but it doesn't feel like mine. And when you said Eliza... She hesitated, pressing her hand against her chest. Something stirred, like a bell in the distance. I just can't reach it. Boone's jaw tightened. His hand flexed near the revolver, not out of threat but habit, a man braced against ghosts. You're Eliza Boone, he said flatly. My wife. You died, or I thought you did. 3 years passed. Fire in Crow's Canyon spread fast. They told me your body was in the ash. Rowan stared at him, her heart thudding. And you believed them. His eyes flickered. For a moment, the hardness cracked, and she glimpsed something raw beneath. I buried what was left. His voice caught, and he snapped his gaze back to the fire. I ain't talking on it. Rowan's breath hitched. The outlaw, the man the whole town had cursed as a devil, sat before her with grief, shadowing his face. She wanted to press, to demand every detail, but fear and pity tangled in her chest. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the pop of burning wood. Rowan finally spoke, softer this time. If I am Eliza Boone, if I was your wife, then why does Sheriff Pike think I'm Rowan Hart, a murderer? Boone's mouth curled, but not in humor. Because Crow put that rope around your neck. He's got the power to twist truth till it screams. And if you've lost your memories, then he'll bury what you knew before it crawls back. The name sent a shiver down her spine. Harlan Crow. Boone had said it with venom, and even the rancher in court had spat it with fear. What do I know? She asked. Boone leaned forward, his face harsh in the flicker of firelight. Enough to kill you for. Enough to bury your name, your life, every breath you ever took. Crow runs this territory by keeping secrets locked in the dark. And you... He jabbed a finger at her. You were the one light bright enough to blind him. Rowan's lips parted. What kind of secrets? His gaze didn't waver. The kind men die for. The kind women hang for. The fire crackled. Rowan shivered despite the heat. For the first time, she wished the rope had done its work. Better the quick snap of a neck than this slow drowning. In shadows and questions, but she wasn't dead. Boone had torn her from the gallows, and now she sat staring at a man who swore he loved her, who swore she had once been his, and who swore her very memory could topple the most powerful man in the territory. She hugged her knees tighter, whispering into the flames. I don't know if I want to remember. Boone leaned back, his expression unreadable, his pale eyes cold again. You don't get to choose, Eliza. The past always comes riding. As if to punctuate his words, a coyote howled on the ridge above them. long and mournful. Boone's hand went to his revolver at once, scanning the dark. Rowan stiffened, pulse hammering. Boone didn't relax. "Get some sleep. We ride before dawn. Crow's dogs will be sniffing our trail already." Rowan lay down on the hard earth, curling her arms around herself, the firelight painting her face. Her throat ached, her wrists stung, and her heart felt split between terror and an unnameable pull toward the man who had saved her. Across the fire, Boone sat watch with his revolver in hand, his figure carved in flame and shadow. Neither trusted the other fully. Neither could. But before the sun rose again, both knew the hunt would close in. Dawn broke red. The first light spilled over the cliffs, washing the desert in blood-colored fire. The chill of night still clung to the stone, but heat promised to rise fast, pushing men and horses toward exhaustion before the day was half spent. Rowan stirred from uneasy sleep, her body stiff from the hard ground. Every dream had been fragments of fire and ash, Boone's voice calling her name, a noose tightening around her throat. She sat up slowly, rubbing her sore wrists, and saw Boone, already awake, crouched near the embers of the fire. He had his revolver drawn, though it wasn't pointed at anything. His pale eyes scanned the horizon like a hawk waiting for prey to stir. "You didn't sleep," Rowan said, her voice low. Boone didn't answer at first. His gaze tracked the ridges, sharp and unblinking. At last he muttered, "Sleep's for men who ain't hunted." A prickle ran down Rowan's spine. She followed his gaze, but the Badlands seemed empty, stretches of red rock and sagebrush, nothing but silence. Yet she felt it too. The stillness wasn't peace. It was waiting. "They're close," Boone said flatly. Before Rowan could ask who, a sound cracked the morning quiet. The echo of a rifle shot, distant but clear. Boone was on his feet, in a heartbeat. "Down!" Rowan dropped to the ground, as a second shot whistled past, striking sparks off the rock wall behind her. Dust rained down, stinging her eyes. From the ridge above, riders appeared, Sheriff Pike and 5 deputies, rifles gleaming in the rising sun. Their horses picked their way along the ledge, cutting off the arroyo below. Rowan's stomach clenched. "They found us." Boone's jaw tightened. He grabbed her by the arm and hauled her behind a cluster of rocks just as another shot rang out. Splinters exploded from stone inches above her head. "Stay low," he growled, sliding his revolver, open and checking the rounds. "They'll try to pin us here." Rowan pressed herself against the rock, heart pounding. Bullets snapped through the air, dust rising in choking clouds. Her mind screamed for her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The arroyo was a box, high walls closing them in. Boone leaned out, fired twice. One deputy cried out and fell from his saddle, rolling down the slope with a thud. The others answered with a volley, the roar of gunfire shaking the canyon. Sheriff Pike's voice carried over the chaos. "Boone, you're trapped! Lay down your—" "A gun and I'll see you tried before the law." Boone laughed, a low, bitter sound. He shouted back, "Laws already hanging women who don't remember their own names. Your law don't mean a damn thing to me." Another shot cracked. Stone shattered inches from Boone's face, forcing him back behind cover. Rowan's breath came fast and shallow. She stared at Boone, who crouched beside her, calm even as bullets screamed through the air. She whispered, "We can't fight. Them all. There's too many." Boone's eyes cut to her, fierce and steady. "Ain't about fighting 'em all. Just enough to break their line." Rowan shook her head. "And then what?" Boone reloaded with quick, practiced hands. "Then we ride it till the devil himself can't follow." The next volley hammered. The rocks, chips flying. Rowan flinched, covering her head. Her eyes caught something glinting in the dirt beside her. A fallen deputy's dropped rifle, wedged between stones where it had tumbled from the ridge. She grabbed it with trembling hands. The wood stock was scuffed, the barrel hot from the morning sun. Boone glanced at her. "You know how to use that?" Rowan swallowed. She didn't know. At least, she didn't remember knowing, but as her fingers curled around The desert swallowed sound after the fight. Where minutes before gunfire had roared and horses screamed, now only the wind moved, whispering through the canyons like a mourner's hymn. Rowan pressed her back against the stone, chest heaving, ears ringing. The rifle still burned in her hands. Boone staggered into view from behind another outcropping, his hat missing, blood running down his temple. His shirt was torn, dark with sweat and dust, but his eyes still burned with that same hard fire. "They're pulling back," he rasped. He spat red into the sand, then holstered his Colt with hands that didn't shake. Crow's money. Don't buy men with iron stomachs. Not for long, anyhow. Rowan dared to peek around the rock. The ridge above was empty. Only a few broken rifles, a downed horse, and the bodies of 2 deputies lay where they'd fallen. Sheriff Pike and the survivors had vanished over the crest, leaving silence and smoke behind them. Her grip on the rifle loosened. It fell into the sand with a clatter. She was trembling all over now, her strength spent, though she hadn't realized it until the fight was done. We made it," she whispered, barely believing the words. Boone's gaze cut to her, sharp, almost angry. "We ain't made nothing yet." He crossed to where their horses were tied, checking the saddlebags. Quickly his movements clipped. "They'll circle wide, cut us off for nightfall. We need water, cover, and distance. Nothing else matters." Rowan forced herself to her feet, legs weak beneath her. Dust caked her throat. She could still taste the acrid smoke of gunpowder. She wanted to sit, to rest, but Boone's urgency pulled her forward. They rode hard. The sun climbed higher, scorching their backs, turning the Badlands into a furnace. Sweat stung Rowan's eyes, her head swimming with heat and exhaustion. Boone led them through ravines and dry washes, always choosing the harder, narrower trails. Where horses stumbled and rocks threatened to break ankles, he was hunting survival in every step. By midday, Rowan swayed in the saddle, half dreaming. The rhythm of the horse lulled her, and for an instant the world shifted. A boy's laughter, the feel of a small hand gripping hers, the smell of wood smoke. Then screams, fire, the sharp crack of gunfire. Rowan gasped and nearly tumbled from her horse. Boone was at her side instantly, steadying her reins. "What is it?" She clutched her head, shaking, tears in her eyes. I saw something. A boy. A child." Her voice cracked. "Was he ours?" Boone froze. The question cut deeper than any bullet. His hand trembled as he reached for her, then stopped short. "A son," he said finally, voice low and rough. "We had a boy. Name was Caleb." The name sent a chill down Rowan's spine. It felt familiar and foreign all at once, like trying to grip smoke. What happened to him?" Boone's jaw tightened, his face a mask of grief and rage. "Crow's men happened. They wanted me broken, and they knew how to do it." He stared hard at the horizon, as if he could burn a hole in it with sheer will. "I swore then I'd bury Harlan Crow in the same ground he left us in." Rowan's throat ached. She wanted to feel sorrow, to let grief wash through her for the son Boone claimed she'd lost. But she couldn't. The memory wasn't hers. Not fully, and the absence of that grief was worse than grief itself. Boone noticed her silence. His eyes softened only a fraction. "You don't remember him," she shook her head helplessly. "I want to, but it's like I'm reaching for someone else's life." The words hung heavy between them, unspoken doubts pressing harder than the sun overhead. By late afternoon they stumbled across a spring tucked beneath an outcropping of red stone. Boone let the horses drink deep, then dropped to his knees, splashing. Water over his face and chest. Rowan followed, cupping cool water in her hands, the relief almost holy. But as the water slid down her throat, her gaze fixed on Boone. He was stripped raw in this moment, weary, battered, yet carrying his vengeance. Like a burning brand, she wondered then, was she bound to him by truth, or by his need for the ghost of a wife he refused to let go? Night fell heavy. They made camp in the canyon, fireless, with only the stars for light. Rowan lay awake, staring at the sky, listening to Boone's even breathing beside her. Her mind churned with flashes of memory that weren't hers, with questions she was too afraid to ask, and somewhere in the darkness, miles away, Sheriff Pike was setting his men on fresh trails. Crow's money flowed like whiskey, and he would drink, until Boone and the woman were nothing but dust in the desert. The fire was small, almost nothing, just a handful of embers tucked under a canopy of scrub brush. Boone insisted on it. The light would be hidden from any eyes hunting the canyon. Rowan sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight around herself. The air was cool, sharp with the smell of sage. But it wasn't the desert wind that made her shiver. It was the faces. They came whenever she closed her eyes. The boy with sun-colored hair, calling her Ma. A man's hand gripping hers. Boone's hand, rough and scarred, pulling her from the smoke. A farmhouse burning, black timbers collapsing as screams tore through the night. Rowan snapped her eyes open, her breath ragged. She pressed her palms to her face, willing the visions away. Boone noticed. He always noticed. He didn't speak right away, just studied her in the flicker of the embers, his eyes shadowed. Finally, he said, "You saw him again, didn't you?" "Caleb." Her voice cracked when she answered, "Yes." Boone leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. The firelight carved hard lines into his face, but his tone was softer than she'd ever heard it. "What did you see?" Rowan hesitated. The images blurred as she tried to hold them steady in her mind. He was laughing, playing in the dirt with a wooden horse. Then she faltered, throat tightening. Then it was fire, always fire. Boone's jaw clenched. His gaze dropped to the dust at his boots. That's how it was. Crows. Men set the place ablaze, shot me near dead, took everything that mattered. The certainty in his voice should have anchored her. Instead, it set her adrift, because though the vision matched his story, it felt wrong. Like she was walking through another woman's life, wearing her grief like an ill-fitting coat. Rowan whispered, almost to herself, "What if it isn't mine?" Boone's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" She hugged herself tighter. "These memories, they come like smoke. They burn in my chest, but they don't belong. Not to me, not the way they should." She met his gaze, her eyes wide, pleading, "Boone, what if I'm not her? What if I'm not Eliza?" For a long, tense moment, Boone said nothing. The fire popped, an ember flaring bright before collapsing. Into ash. His face was stone, unreadable. At last he rose, pacing a few steps away, his boots crunching in the sand. "You are her," he said, voice low, fierce. "Eliza Boone, my wife, Caleb's mother. You were taken from me, but you ain't gone. You're here." Rowan flinched at the conviction in his tone. It wasn't just belief, it was need. "I don't remember the boy's voice," she whispered, tears welling. "Not the way a mother should. If he was mine, wouldn't I feel it? Wouldn't I know him in my bones?" Boone turned back to her, eyes blazing. "Crow stole that from you. Whatever he did, whatever lies he spun, he broke pieces of you I can't put back, but I know who you are. Don't you let him win by doubting." Rowan pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart hammered wild and unsteady. Boone's words should have been comfort, but they were chains, binding her to a truth she wasn't sure belonged to her. She lay down on the hard ground, turning her face to the stars. Sleep came in fits, dragging her into visions sharp as broken glass, a badge pinned to her chest, the letters Pinkerton glinting in the lamplight, a ledger filled with Crow's name, numbers that smelled of blood. A woman's reflection in a mirror, her own face, but not Eliza Boone's. Rowan woke with a gasp, clutching her temples, the world spinning. The sky was paling with dawn. Boone was already saddling the horses, moving with grim purpose. She rose unsteadily, her voice raw. "Boone, I think I was someone else." He froze, his hand tightening on the reins. Slowly, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. Rowan's words shook as they left her lips. "What if I was never your wife at all?" The silence that followed was colder than the desert night. They rode until Rowan thought her bones would shake apart. The canyon spat them out into a stretch of broken prairie, where tufts of buffalo grass clung to cracked earth and the horizon shimmered in the sun. Boone's silence was heavy as iron. He'd barely spoken since her words that morning. What if I was never your wife at all? She followed him wordlessly, dust rising in faint clouds beneath the horse's hooves. Every mile weighed on her chest. By late afternoon, the land softened. A line of cottonwoods appeared along a narrow creek, their leaves whispering with the breeze. Nestled against the trees stood a sagging cabin, weathered gray and patched with rusted tin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Boone reined in. "We'll stop here." Rowan looked at him questioningly. "Old friend," Boone muttered. "He'll help us." The horses snorted as they approached. An old man stepped out onto the porch, stooped but broad-shouldered, his beard gone white, his eyes sharp despite the years. He wore suspenders over a frayed shirt, and a revolver hung low on his hip, more for memory than use. When his gaze landed on Boone, he froze. Then a slow, weary smile tugged at his lips. "Lord above," the man rasped. "Elias Boone, I thought you'd gone to dust." Boone dismounted, gripping the man's shoulder hard. "Not yet, Amos." Amos's eyes flicked past him to Rowan. The smile faltered, his brow furrowed deep. Boone said firmly, "You remember my wife, Eliza." The name hung in the air like a shot waiting for its echo. Rowan shifted uneasily under the old man's stare. Amos studied her face, his jaw working. Finally, he said, quiet but steady, "That ain't Eliza." Rowan's stomach dropped. Boone stiffened, his voice a growl. "Don't start that, old man. You know her as well as I do." Amos shook his head. "I buried Eliza Boone with my own hands. Saw her face before the dirt covered her. Whatever woman you've got there, she ain't the one you lost." The world tilted beneath Rowan. She gripped the saddle to steady herself, breath shallow. Boone's eyes burned, his fists clenching. "You're wrong." Amos's gaze softened, but his words cut sharper for it. "No, Elias, you're the one won't let go of the dead." Rowan's heart hammered. The ground between her and Boone felt suddenly fragile, like one wrong step would send them both tumbling into an abyss. "Then who am I?" she whispered. Amos turned to her. His eyes, though old, were piercing. "That's for you to reckon with. But you ain't Eliza, not the woman I knew." Silence fell, broken only. By the creak of the cottonwoods in the wind, Boone's face was carved stone, unreadable. He looked at Amos, then at Rowan. His voice was low, dangerous. "Crows twisted your head, filled it with lies." Rowan shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "Boone, if Amos is right," her words broke, "then who have I been? To you!" Boone's silence was worse than denial. Amos shifted, uneasy with the storm brewing. "You're welcome to water, to food, but if you're running from Crow, best keep riding. He won't let either of you breathe long." Rowan followed Boone inside, but the cabin's walls felt like they were closing in. Amos's words echoed in her chest, pounding like a second heartbeat. "That ain't Eliza. I buried her myself." And for the first time, Rowan truly feared Boone, not for his violence, but for the possibility that he'd built his entire life around a ghost and chained her to it. The cabin smelled of smoke and old wood, of lives lived too long in the shadow of survival. Rowan sat at the rough-hewn table, a chipped tin cup of water in her hands, staring at the warped reflection on its surface. Amos's words still thundered. In her chest, "That ain't Eliza. I buried her with my own hands." Her pulse rattled, her throat tight. Boone sat across from her, his shoulders hunched, his hat brim shadowing his eyes. He hadn't spoken since they entered the cabin. The silence pressed on Rowan until she couldn't stand it. "Boone, If he's right. Boone's fist slammed, the table rattling the tin cup. He ain't right. His voice was low, shaking with barely contained fury. Eliza's here, you're here. Don't let that old man's lies twist your head. Rowan recoiled at the force of it. But before she could answer, Amos came through the door carrying a shotgun and wearing a grim expression. They're coming, he said flatly. Riders, 6 or 7 of them, dust on the horizon, Crow's men. Rowan's breath hitched. Boone rose instantly, his anger forgotten, replaced with cold purpose. How far? Couple minutes out, Amos said. Enough time to pick your ground, not enough to run. Boone grabbed his revolver, checked the rounds. His movements were steady, practiced. He glanced at Rowan. Stay inside. Keep your head down. But Rowan's hand went unconsciously to the rifle Amos had propped near the door. She remembered the feel of the weapon in her grip, the way the sights had lined up without thought. Her palms itched, Amos noticed. His eyes narrowed. You know how to use that? Rowan hesitated, but only for a breath. Yes. The old man studied her, then nodded once, grim approval in his gaze. Then use it. The sound came then. Hoofbeats growing louder, like thunder rolling closer. Shouts, the metallic clink of rifles being drawn. Rowan's heart raced, but she didn't cower. She moved to the window, peering out. Dust plumes rose from the prairie. Figures rode hard toward the cabin, guns already glinting in the dying light. Boone's voice was steady. We hold 'em off. No one sets foot in this house. The first. Shots came sharp and sudden, splintering the porch railing. Rowan flinched but steadied, raising the rifle. She drew a breath, aimed at a rider breaking ahead of the others, and squeezed the trigger. The man tumbled from his saddle, rolling in. The dirt, Rowan's stomach lurched, but she didn't stop. She worked the lever, fired again. Another rider veered off, cursing. Boone stepped through the doorway, his revolver flashing, each shot placed with brutal precision. Amos fired from the porch, the shotgun roaring thunder. The cabin shuddered. Under the storm of bullets, glass shattered, wood splintered, smoke and powder thickened the air. Rowan's body moved on instinct, ducking, aiming, firing, reloading. Each shot rang through her bones with a terrible familiarity. At last, silence fell. The prairie lay strewn with bodies and abandoned horses. 2 riders fled into the distance, dust trails fading with the light. Rowan lowered the rifle slowly, her arms trembling, her breath ragged. Her ears rang with the echoes of gunfire, but louder still was the realization pressing against her ribs. She wasn't Eliza Boone. Whoever she was, she'd been trained for this. For violence, for killing. Boone stepped back inside, his revolver still smoking. He glanced at Rowan, saw the rifle in her hands, the calm steadiness of her aim. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. Amos broke the silence. Crowy won't stop. He knows what she is now. Rowan's voice was low, shaking with the truth she could no longer ignore. Then what am I? No one answered. The only reply was the stench of gunpowder, the bodies cooling in the dirt, and the knowledge that her past was riding closer with every mile. The desert night lay heavy, thick with the scent of smoke and dust from the day's battle. The bodies outside Amos's cabin hadn't even cooled before Boone was packing the horses, his movements clipped, wordless. Rowan stood near the porch, the rifle still in her hands, her knuckles white. The memory of the gunfight clung to her like blood she couldn't wash off. Boone finally broke the silence. We ride tonight. Rowan's voice was hoarse. To where? Boone looked up, eyes like steel. To Crow. Amos, leaning on his shotgun, spat into the dirt. That's suicide. Crow's got men, walls, money. He'll bury you both before you ever get close. Boone's jaw tightened. I've run long enough. Man's taken everything. Time he bled for it. Rowan's stomach twisted. She wanted to say no, to refuse, to tell Boone she wasn't the woman he thought she was. But the words wouldn't come, because somewhere deep inside, under the fear and doubt, she wanted Crow too. She wanted answers, and she knew he held them. They rode through the night, stars cold above them. By dawn, the land rose into rocky hills, where Crow's stronghold, crouched like a vulture. It wasn't just a ranch, it was a fortress. High wooden palisades ringed a sprawling compound of barns, corrals, and a two-story house with wide porches and shuttered windows. Men patrolled the walls with rifles, their silhouettes sharp against the rising sun. Rowan reined in, her throat tight. "How do we get inside?" Boone's eyes didn't leave the stronghold. "Same way we've done everything else." He drew his revolver. "With lead." But before they could move, Rowan's vision blurred. A sharp, searing pain split her. Skull. She clutched her head, gasping as images flooded her, her hand holding a badge. A ledger with Crow's name and the words "land fraud, murder for hire." Her own face in a cracked mirror, lips whispering, "Clara Holt." Rowan staggered, nearly falling from her horse. Boone caught her, steadying her in the saddle. His face was taut with worry, but she saw something else in his eyes. Fear. "What did you see?" he demanded. Her voice trembled. "My name, Clara Holt." She swallowed hard. "I was Pinkerton. I was sent after Crow. I wasn't your wife, Boone. I never was." The words hung between them, heavier than the mountains. Boone's grip on. Her arm tightened, his face pale beneath the dust. "No." His voice was barely a whisper. "No, you're Eliza, you're—" "Stop!" Rowan snapped, pulling free. Her eyes burned. "I've seen it, Boone. I was hunting him, not living with you, not raising a boy. That was her life, Eliza's, and she's gone." For a moment, Boone looked shattered, like a man standing in the ruins of everything he'd built. Then his face hardened, rage flaring behind his eyes. "Crow killed her. He killed Caleb. And now he's turned you into a weapon against me." "No," Rowan said fiercely. "He tried to bury me, but he failed. And now I'm going to finish what I started." They stared at each other, two ghosts bound by different truths. Then Boone gave a short, bitter laugh. "Fine. Eliza or Clara, Pinkerton or Outlaw's wife, don't matter anymore. We're both gunning for the same man." He spurred his horse forward, down toward the stronghold. Rowan followed, her pulse pounding with fear and fire alike. Gunfire erupted the moment they crossed into range. Bullets snapped through the air, kicking up dust. Boone rode hard, firing from the saddle, each shot cracking like thunder. Rowan dropped low, aimed her rifle, and sent two guards tumbling from the wall. They broke through the outer gate, wood splintering as Boone's horse crashed it open. The compound exploded with chaos, men shouting, horses screaming, lead flying. In every direction, Rowan fought like a woman possessed, her body moving faster than thought. Every pull of the trigger felt carved into her bones. Each shot brought her closer to something she couldn't name. Then the porch doors of the big house swung open, and Harlan Crow stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his beard trimmed neat, his eyes cold as riverstone. A fine black coat draped his frame, a gold watch chain glinting against his vest. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't need to. His presence alone stilled the fight, his gaze locked on Rowan. "Well, well," Crow drawled, his voice smooth as polished steel. "The little Pinkerton that wouldn't stay dead." Rowan froze, the rifle heavy in her hands. Crow's smile was thin, sharp. "You played your part well, Clara, wearing Eliza Boone's face, living her life, sleeping in her bed." His eyes slid to Boone, a cruel gleam sparking. "No wonder he clings to you. You were his grief and his comfort all in one. A lie sweeter than truth." Boone's face twisted in fury. "You son of a—" But Crow raised a hand, and half a dozen rifles lifted from the porch, barrels aimed at Rowan and Boone. "Kill the outlaw," Crow said calmly. "Bring me the girl alive. She still owes me answers." The air hung thick with gun smoke and dust, the compound silent except for the creak of saddles and the restless stamping of horses. Crow stood tall on the porch, flanked by his riflemen. Boone and Rowan sat exposed in the yard, the sun burning. Hot on their backs, a dozen muzzles aimed at their hearts. Rowan's fingers flexed around the rifle. Her pulse pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. She was Clara Holt. She wasn't a widow, clinging to a life that had never been hers. She was the hunter, the law that Crow thought he'd buried. Crow's smile was a knife. "Put it down, Clara. You're not here to kill me. You're here to come home." Rowan's stomach turned. "Home?" Her voice cut like flint. "You ruined lives. You bled towns dry. You buried Eliza Boone in the dirt and left her husband a broken man. And you tried to do the same to me." Crow's expression didn't waver. "I gave you a gift, a new face, a new life. You could have stayed buried, could have stayed his, but you came crawling back, same as always, my hound on a leash." Boone snarled, his revolver twitching in his hand. "You don't get to talk about her, either of them." "Quiet, Outlaw," Crow said, his eyes never leaving Rowan. "This is between me and her." The yard was silent, except for the whisper of wind. Rowan met Crow's stare, steady, unblinking. "You're right. It is between us." And she fired. Her bullet struck the man on Crow's left, dropping him before he could even shout. Boone exploded into motion, his revolver barking fire, cutting down two more men before they could raise their rifles. The yard erupted. Gunfire shattered the air, hot lead whistling past Rowan's ears. She ducked behind a water trough, reloaded, and rose to fire again. Boone fought like a man with nothing left to lose, his shots grim and precise. But Crow didn't flinch. He stepped calmly off the porch, pistol drawn, moving through the chaos like a dark tide. His men closed ranks, pouring fire toward Rowan and Boone, bullets chewing through wood and dirt. A sharp cry tore the air. Boone staggered, a round catching. Him high in the shoulder, he dropped to one knee, teeth bared in pain. "Boone!" Rowan broke cover, sprinting to his side. She hauled him back behind the trough, blood soaking her hands. He gritted his teeth. "Don't you stop now. Don't you dare." Rowan's breath came hard, sharp. She rose, rifle braced against her shoulder, and cut down two men trying to flank them. But Crow was closing in, his pistol steady, his eyes cold. "You see now?" Crow called over the din, his voice carrying clear. "You were never Clara Holt. You were never Eliza Boone. You were mine, my creation, my shadow. You kill for me or you die by me." Rowan's vision tunneled. Another flash burned behind her eyes, herself standing in a dim office, a Pinkerton badge heavy on her chest, Crow across the desk, his hand closing on her throat. His voice then was the same as now. "You'll never be free." Her chest heaved. She stood tall, blood and dust streaking her face, her rifle raised, steady. "I'm not yours," she said, her voice like steel. "I never was." She fired. The bullet tore across Crow's shoulder, spinning him back. His pistol went off wild, the shot cracking the porch beam. Boone surged up, despite the blood pouring from his wound, and emptied his revolver into the rifleman trying to protect Crow. Rowan advanced, each step deliberate, her rifle firing, reloading, firing again. Men fell around her. The yard stank of powder and blood. Crow stumbled but did not fall. He roared in fury, raising his pistol with his good arm. "You'll die here, Holt." But Rowan was faster. She drew Boone's spare revolver from his belt, her arm steady as stone. One shot, straight to the heart. Crow staggered, his eyes wide, with disbelief. His pistol slipped from his hand, clattering to the dirt. He fell to his knees, then to his face, the dust swallowing him whole. Silence fell. The surviving gunmen fled, scattering into the hills. The stronghold, once Crow's empire, lay broken. Bodies sprawled in the dirt, windows shattered, gates hanging loose. Rowan stood in the center of it all, smoke curling from the revolver, her breath ragged, her hands steady. Behind her, Boone groaned, slumping against the trough. Rowan rushed to him, dropping to her knees. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with pride and sorrow. "You did it," he whispered. Rowan gripped his hand tight. "We did it." But in her chest, she knew the truth. She had killed Crow, yes, but the blood, the violence, the memories, she could no longer deny. They weren't just Crow's doing. They were hers, and the reckoning was only beginning. The compound smoldered under the morning sun. Burnt timbers creaked, glass crunched beneath boots, and the stink of gunpowder hung like a fog over the yard. Crow's stronghold, once proud and untouchable, was nothing but wreckage now. Rowan stood among the ruins, her rifle dangling at her side, her eyes hollow. The bodies of Crow's men lay scattered, some slumped against walls, others sprawled in the dirt where they fell. Carrion birds circled above, already closing in. She didn't look at Crow. She didn't need to. His blood was still drying on her hands. Boone sat propped against the trough, his shoulder hastily bandaged. He was pale, sweat streaking the dust on his face, but alive. His revolver still rested in his lap, though his hand trembled too much to hold it steady. When Rowan came to him, his eyes lifted, searching her face. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the kind that stretched wider than words. Finally, Boone spoke, his voice raw. "I wanted to believe." Rowan's throat tightened. She crouched down, her hand hovering near his. "I know." He looked away, out over the broken compound. "Thought bringing you back meant bringing her back. Eliza, my boy, the life I lost." His jaw clenched. "But it was a ghost, just a ghost." Rowan swallowed hard. "I'm not her, Boone, and I never was. But I'm not Crow's either. I'm Clara Holt, and I've been running from that name too damn long." Boone finally met her eyes. For a heartbeat, pain and longing flickered there, the ache of a man who had lost everything twice. But then he nodded, slow and heavy, as though setting down a weight he had carried too long. "Then be her," he rasped. "Don't let him win by making you doubt it." Rowan closed her fingers around his hand. His grip was weak, but it steadied. Her. They left Crow's body where it fell. The desert would claim him, as it did all men sooner or later. By the time they mounted their horses, the sun was climbing high, baking the earth in white heat. Rowan guided her mare to the ridge above the stronghold and looked back one last time. The walls were cracked, the gates broken, the house burned black. A kingdom of dust returned to dust. She thought of Eliza Boone, a woman she had never been, but whose life had wrapped around her like a second skin. She thought of the badge she once carried, the oath she had made, and the blood she had spilled since, and she thought of the road ahead. Boone groaned as he settled into his saddle, his face tight with pain, but his eyes still sharp. "Where to? Now?" he asked. Rowan looked east, where the sky stretched wide and endless. "I don't know," she admitted, "but not back. Not ever back." Boone gave a short, bitter laugh. "Forward, then, till the road runs out." They rode in silence, two figures etched against the horizon, a broken outlaw and a woman caught between two lives, bound together by loss, by blood, by the West itself. Behind them, the stronghold faded into the heat haze, leaving nothing but ash and memory, and ahead, the land rolled on, wide, empty, and waiting. Weeks later, the desert gave way to softer land, rolling hills, mesquite giving over to cottonwood groves, and rivers that cut silver lines through the earth. Rowan, Clara, had almost grown used to the name again. Boone said little about it. His wound healed slow, leaving him leaner, harder, more worn than before. They traveled together, though sometimes it felt less like company and more like two shadows drifting the same trail. One night, as they camped beneath a stand of cottonwoods, Boone sat staring into the fire, the glow painting his hollow cheeks. "You'll leave sooner or later," he said quietly. Rowan looked up from where she was oiling her rifle. "And you?" He shrugged, wincing at the pull of his shoulder. "Man like me, ain't much left. But the trail, dust don't settle easy when you've made your life in blood." Rowan's hands stilled. She thought of the badge she once carried, of the ledger with Crow's name in her own handwriting. She thought of Eliza Boone, a woman who never asked to be caught in the web Crow spun. "I was meant to stand for something," Rowan said at last. "But I don't know if I can anymore. I don't even know if I want to." Boone's gaze lifted to hers, steady and sharp despite the wear in him. "Then you make it up new. Don't matter what's behind you, only what's ahead." For the first time in a long while, Rowan smiled, though it was a sad smile. Spoken like a man with nothing left to lose. Boone's eyes flickered. Pain. Tightening his jaw, but he didn't argue. By dawn, they saddled up again. The trail stretched wide under a sky the color of ash and fire. Boone rode a pace ahead, his frame stooped but unbroken. Rowan followed, the rifle across her saddle, the weight of her name solid on her tongue. Clara Holt. The wind carried the smell of mesquite, of rain waiting somewhere distant. She breathed it in, deep and steady. She wasn't Eliza. She wasn't Crow's shadow. She wasn't the law's hound anymore either. She was Clara Holt, alive when she shouldn't be, riding into a future that was hers alone to claim. And in the West, that was enough. Thank you for being here and sharing this story with me. If you're ready for more, just click on the next one waiting for you right now. And please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so we can keep exploring new stories together.